Hi, I'm Sonya White Jaguar. Welcome to White Jaguar Weekend Read, my weekly audiobook series. Today I'm reading my free book, Writing Alan Rickman's Autobiography, a fan fiction romance. Chapter 3, The Ghost of Alan's Past. I visited with Alan at his apartment many times during the following weeks, in between a couple of trips he took back home to London for work. During our meetings, he told me a lot about his career, his early years in the theater, how he landed some of his most popular movie roles, and the friends he'd made along the way. One day, we were enjoying the afternoon sunshine on the terrace by the jacuzzi. Alan was working on his garden sketch while I sat on the sofa making notes for his book. He told me that his latest film, A Little Chaos, was receiving mixed reviews. The disappointment weighed on him because of how hard the entire team had worked on the movie. One of the things that most impressed me about Alan was his concern for his colleagues, no matter the project. He said, "One of the hardest things to deal with as an actor is criticism. At least it is for me." It struck me that sketching may have been therapeutic for him. So I asked, "Does sketching help you deal with criticism?" "Sometimes," he replied. "It helps me think more clearly. My mind is always racing 100 miles an hour. When it's just me and the page, I have space to breathe. I ebb and flow with the lines and colors. I enter the picture and become one with it. Maybe that sounds strange to you." "No," I said, "as a writer, I know exactly what you mean. Sometimes I become one with the story I'm working on. My characters leap off the page at me, and I find myself talking directly to them. Have you ever done that? As an actor, have you had conversations in your head with the characters you're playing to help you learn how to play them?" Alan said, "Mostly, I just research personalities and psychology and determine what would drive a person in a particular situation to think and behave a certain way. I try to think like the character. I don't talk to them necessarily, but occasionally. You do such a great job bringing a character to life that I wondered if you would visualize them in your mind and talk to them like an invisible person." The ones I'll talk to in my mind and out loud when I'm alone in the room are the critics. I've always struggled to make peace with other people's negative opinions. I could get 10 reviews for a performance in a play, 9 rave reviews and 1 negative one. Years later, I won't remember the positive ones, but I'll never forget that negative one. Alan paused as he stepped back and took in his sketch from a different angle. "I'm an artist," he continued after returning to the drawing. "Artists can be terribly misunderstood because we see the world in our own way. But our perspective on things is just as valid as anybody else's. I remember when I did The Winter Guest. No one understood that film. The reactions were laughable." The Winter Guest is the first movie Alan directed, which was released in 1997. The film features vignettes of people at various transitional stages of life, not the least of which is physical death. The most prominent characters are an older woman and her daughter. The latter is grieving the loss of her husband. Like A Little Chaos, the film received mixed reviews upon its release. Despite that, many fans have rated the movie favorably. "Well," I said, "it wasn't Die Hard. There weren't explosions every 5 minutes. You're guaranteed a certain measure of success with that type of movie. A film about a mother and daughter, on the other hand, who are talking about getting older and dealing with loss, that's a tougher sell." I shrugged. "Maybe it hits too close to home. People are looking for an escape from reality. They don't want reality to bump into them and rub their noses in it." Alan said, "I've always liked when a story would hold up a mirror and say, 'It's like that, isn't it?' The further away we get from that, I think we've lost the point. Don't you agree?" "I'm not sure," I said, trying not to sound negative. "I was never much of a fan of morality tales and being told what to think about something. If you try too hard to present a particular point of view, especially in today's toxic culture where people don't want to listen to opposing views, audiences will tune you out right away and leave their dissenting opinion in a comment or a review." Alan nodded without turning away from his drawing. "That happened to me a lot." I said, "It's been nearly 20 years since you made The Winter Guest. How do you wish people had responded to that film?" "I wish more people had seen the film through the eyes of an artist. Even those who got the point thought the movie was trite." "I understand what you were trying to do," I said, "but maybe the point of the film was lost on some because the story structure wasn't followed that moviegoers expect. While a plot is nothing without compelling characters, characters are nothing without a compelling plot. There was no threat of danger, like in Die Hard. There was no hero to root for, like in Robin Hood. A study in life and death and transitions is a valid reason to make a movie, but it may not resonate with viewers without a clear story arc and someone to root for. There's a reason that traditional story structure is so successful. "What's wrong with a little experimentation?" Alan asked. "Why does art always have to look a certain way? Look at the Dadaists. I think they managed to get their point across." Alan was referring to Dadaism, an anti-establishment art movement of the early 20th century that arose in reaction to the horrors of the First World War. Relying heavily on humor and absurdity, Dadaism was satirical in nature and rejected traditional art values, sometimes calling the most uncreative objects art. "Do you consider yourself a Dadaist type of storyteller?" I asked Alan. He chuckled. "No, I just wanted to tell a story about ordinary people in ordinary situations that no one ever hears about. And I believe in the power of women. I think you can see that in The Winter Guest. I certainly hoped A Little Chaos would show that, but nobody wants to talk about that. All they want to talk about is how did you do the fall at the end of Die Hard? Or tell us what it was like to work on Harry Potter." Well, Hans Gruber, Professor Snape, those were extraordinary characters. Some audiences may not care as much about ordinary people in ordinary situations. The most memorable stories tend to be about ordinary people in extraordinary situations, or vice versa. "I'm haunted by the ghost of my past," Alan said. "Everything I do will always be held up against this other work, and it will never measure up. I'm not allowed to experiment and grow as an artist. If I don't stick with what's popular and expected, I'm a disappointment." As a romance author who'd been rejected for failing to produce reliably high sales numbers, I could relate to Alan's laments. He continued, "You have to follow your heart and do what you feel passionate about. What you feel will do the most good in the world, even if it runs counter to most people's expectations. That's how I see it anyway." Sighing, he threw his colored pencils down. He turned toward me and said, "Put your notes away. I don't want to work on the book anymore today. Let's go inside and have a drink." I sighed too, discouraged by our lack of progress. By this time, my hurried scribbles filled nearly 3 legal pads, but we still hadn't discussed what the focus of the book would be and how we would organize the material. I'd have to steer the conversation in that direction soon, or there would be no book. Join me next week for Chapter 4, Building Up to an Orgasm. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already so you'll be notified when the next video is posted. You can also sign up for my newsletter on my website, sonyawhitejaguar.com, and get notified that way. I send out newsletters twice a month. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next week.